What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. And once again, I'm joined by the one and only Ty Dunne. You can follow him on Twitter at Ty Dunne, Tydunne. You can find him on Go Long. The website is golongtd.com. Highly recommend checking it out. We've been lucky enough to have Ty every other week. We're having Peter Bukowski every other week, which if you haven't checked out Peter's new stuff yet over on The Leap, highly recommend that as well. Ton of great guests, but Ty, I'm so excited to be here talking with you today. We've got a ton to get into. First of all, welcome back to the show.
Great to be here, man. And it's going to be a little more cheerful this week, right? I think we talked out of that Saints game.
We did
on our first session. So a little different tenor around 1265, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think that's probably a great place to start. Obviously we're at Thursday now as people are listening to this. So, recaps of Packers, Niners probably only goes so far, but I still am very intrigued as to what your gut reaction is. I'll just say up front, I was more surprised probably by the Packers win in San Francisco than I was with the loss in New Orleans. I just thought, football is a fun game and we get to talk about all these fantasy players and Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, but so often it's so simple that it comes down to the trenches. And going into this game, I thought San Francisco had a severe advantage on the trenches on both sides of the ball. And usually that doesn't bode well, especially if you're on the road. I thought Green Bay did a phenomenal job of making this much more about Aaron Rodgers versus Jimmy Garoppolo and Garoppolo throwing 40 times a game than it was about the guys in the trenches. Kudos to Adam Stenavich and the entire, up front on both sides of the ball because they were prepared. But what was your gut reaction coming out of this game?
Two things probably stood out the most to me, Andy. Number one, when Mason Crosby goes out there for that field goal attempt, it's like Larry Bird at the free throw line. It's like automatic. You just know. He's just going to make it. Doesn't matter. It could have been from 70 yards. Mason Crosby is in some kind of zone where he is going to make every clutch kick that is ever asked of him, which
Crazy.
It's phenomenal. I mean, I went back and read a story. I talked at length with Mason Crosby at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. I want to say it was 2013. So 2012 is when he was dead last in accuracy. I think it was like 63% that season. And then boom, he's in the mid 80s that next year. And I just thought it was fascinating. The way he got out of that slump, he said a lot of kickers try to get to a different zen, a different place, kind of let go. He did the opposite. He tried to embrace the moment, embrace the intensity. Don't hide from that pressure. Don't try to displace yourself from the other 52 players on the team. Be one of 53, be part of the team. Always try to put points on the board. Embrace that pressure. Since then, he's been one of the best kickers in the NFL, maybe NFL history. So, I don't know what else you can say about him. Obviously the kick against Dallas in the playoffs stands out. But whenever he's asked to make one of these, he does. And I think there's a reason Aaron Rodgers kind of fist pumped like that, right? When they set up, where any other quarterback, are they like that euphoric in that moment? Because he knew he was going to make it. So special teams, they're in a great place there. And secondly, you really touched on it, the physicality of the Green Bay Packers. I started on the beat at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. I had been interning out there, years prior, but day in and day out covering the team right out of the Super Bowl win. So 2011 through 2015, 2016, I believe. What happened every January? They just got pushed around. They got bullied up front. They win 12, 13, even 15 games in 2011, but when push came to shove, they couldn't shove. And right. I had the same fear you did for Green Bay in that game, missing key players up front. It just seems like it's going to be disaster. Aaron Rodgers has a lot to do with it. His quick release. He really trusts his line. Maybe years past that trust wasn't fully there, and he might have kind of escaped the pocket a little early. Completely. You remember those days, and he trusts him. The ball's out. He's staying in the pocket. That's going to help his longevity. The rules are going to help his longevity. But they didn't get pushed around. They pushed around. San Francisco couldn't run the ball. Green Bay did whatever they wanted to offensively. Talk about a week-to-week league, because this was a different Packers team against San Francisco.
I couldn't agree more. That was not the same Packers, especially on defense, flying around to the football that we saw the first 2 weeks. That was not the same offense that we saw the first 2 weeks. It was a different team, and it was striking. And one of the things that I spoke with Ben Fennell on here a week ago, and one of the things that he said is he wanted to see the Packers treat this as a big time game, Sunday Night Football, going to San Francisco, because as you mentioned, Green Bay hasn't been the best in some of those, playoff situations where they go against a tough team on the road. Like they haven't done great. So treat this like a warm up to those situations in the playoffs. I'm not saying Green Bay necessarily did that, but the intensity was certainly on display in that game. And it was a 10 tones different than what we saw against Detroit and against New Orleans.
No doubt about it. I mean, whatever the reason was for that week one absolute thud. And hey, it could have been that was the craziest offseason I've ever seen for the Green Bay Packers or any team. I mean, when the star quarterback and the front office are staring each other down for 6 months, maybe that leaked into it. Maybe it had to do with coaching. Maybe it had to do with the starters really not playing much in the preseason, but they got it out of their system because, I mean, they've been better each week since. I mean, they kind of played patty cake there with the Lions for a half, and then boom, they run away from them. San Francisco, right out of the chute, they're playing well. So, yeah, I think that, against Pittsburgh here, I don't want to, jump too far ahead, but this is a game where they should just blow them out of the water, right? I mean, Green Bay's peaking early, playing really well. Pittsburgh's floundering. People are wondering, Ben Roethlisberger, like, should he even be the quarterback? I don't, 2 weeks ago, I think looking at this game, it's like, man, the Steelers just came here to Buffalo and just punched the Bills in the jaw.
Exactly. Week to week league, like you're saying, that's the craziest result of this season right now is the Steelers beating the Bills week one, in my opinion. That's insane.
Doesn't make any sense. I will say this though, Andy, like, I mean, being around that Steelers team, and I did a long story on them 2 years ago, when they had all the injuries, their wide receivers coach actually died in training camp, and then they lose Big Ben to an injury. They lost starters throughout the year. So I spent like about a month and a half around the team. I mean, like, Duck Hodges is their quarterback, for crying out loud. Mason Rudolph,
right.
And they were in the playoff hunt. I mean, they finished 8-8, but they were right in the playoff hunt to week 17. So if there's one team that I'm not going to count out, that I'm not going to say is absolutely dead, it's the Steelers. I mean, they've got, in my opinion, the best coach in the NFL, Mike Tomlin, because he's a player's coach, but like, talking to guys, like, he's unbelievably hard on his players. Even when he was like a young assistant in Minnesota, Chad Greenway, I'll never forget, he said, like, he's maybe a year or two older than the players, and he is getting after guys in positional meetings like he's never been yelled at before. So he commands respect, and guys love him. If somebody can handle this moment, it's a coach like that. So, even though it seems like the Packers are doing this and the Steelers are doing this, I'm sure Matt LaFleur is telling his team, like, you cannot take this team lightly because they're going to come ready to play.
No, like you said, it's a week-to-week league, and Pittsburgh's going to be desperate. They don't want to go 1-3. They still have high hopes for the season and trying to make a playoff push. And again, Mike Tomlin's somebody that's definitely going to get them rallied and playing well. I was talking to Nagler earlier this week, and one of the things I mentioned is it feels the Steelers team with Mike Tomlin right now feels a little bit like the latter days of Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. Two fantastic coaches where I don't necessarily think like in Pittsburgh, the team is like not motivated by Tomlin anymore, but it just seems like there's something missing, and maybe it's just Big Ben, right? Like, he's just so far gone from what he was prior, but there does seem to almost be like this staleness. Seems harsh because, again, I think Tomlin's better than that, but it just sort of seems to be the same old. Now, Pittsburgh has a variety of issues, right? Their offensive line is a mess right now. They drafted a running back in the first round when not having an offensive line. Juju is not, or was hurt last week, may not play this week. Watt's hurt, Tuitt's hurt. Like, that's probably way more important, but I do get some of those same vibes. But I think this week will tell a lot for Pittsburgh as well.
I think it's Roethlisberger, right? I mean, they don't want him out there throwing the ball 60 times like he did against Cleveland in that wild card loss, like he did, was it just last week, or maybe it was the Raiders game, and he's thrown it 58 times like that. They're not going to win that way. I know he lost some weight, but he's old. He's 39 going on 59, the way he's played seriously in his career. So, and you're right. So it's that, and combined with the fact that they reset on the offensive line. I mean, they completely had to start over in some spots for good reason, but these are all new players with a rookie back, and you're trying to run more, but Ben Roethlisberger still has autonomy at the line of scrimmage in Matt Canada's offense, from what I can tell. I don't know what this is. Like, I mean, you're right. It's crazy that they beat Buffalo. I think Buffalo was so juiced for that game. And, you know, Josh Allen, when he's too juiced, like, you're not going to get the same Josh Allen sometimes. Maybe that had something to do with it. But they're sticking with Ben Roethlisberger. They kind of have to stick with him because they don't have a plan B. You're not going to turn it over to Dwayne Haskins at this point.
Right.
So I don't know where they go from here. I really don't. I think that their best bet is to just try to win with defense, try to get that running game going, try to keep games close, and do what they did against Buffalo, where they block a punt. Ben Roethlisberger made 2 throws he had to make late in the game. He can still move around enough to do that. And they've got a shot. And like I said, I'm not going to count them out, but I'm going to be pretty lukewarm and tepid with my enthusiasm around this team, because it's like, geez, right, this was the offseason of the quarterback, Andy. I mean, every team is acting out of desperation. I mean, the Rams, the Niners, even the Packers, I think, you know, they easily could, we've talked about it, they easily could have said, screw it. All right, you don't want to be here? See ya. We're going to take our 3-4 starters from a team like Denver. Those guys look pretty good. And they could have done that. But in different ways, all these teams kind of made these bold moves at quarterback, and Pittsburgh kind of just ran it back with Ben Roethlisberger. I can see why fans are a little upset right now down there. I really can.
No, 1,000,000%. I was saying it, you know, facetiously. I was asked, I do a show here in Green Bay Nation, and they said, you know, what does Green Bay need to win this game? And I, again, half jokingly said, Ben Roethlisberger to be healthy enough to start in the game. Like last week was, you have your highlight. Last week was almost a blooper reel at times for Roethlisberger. You had some, like, I don't care who the starting quarterback is. You just don't see some of the things that happened in that game happen to starting quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, the last play, obviously the check down, the swing pass, I won't say check down, but swing pass on 4th down was so odd, and who knows what the situation called it, but there was just so much that was so weird from Ben in that game. And again, maybe they're due for a bounce back. Maybe he has a great game this week. We'll see, but this is nothing like what Ben Roethlisberger has been like for the majority of his career. Although I do think a lot of this writing was on the wall last season as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I think when they kind of fell apart down the stretch, maybe they, you know, Kevin Colbert, Mike Tomlin, both the Rooneys, I mean, probably is bigger than them, right? I mean, the Rooneys, they've been a part of Ben Roethlisberger life since 2005. They love him. He loves them. He is the face of the franchise. So they want to hang on. I mean, there's 2 ways to go about this. Like, you can hang on to your Hall of Fame quarterback to the bitter end. And you know what? Maybe best case scenario, they're probably thinking they could have pulled off a Denver. And you know, Peyton Manning threw 9 touchdowns, 17 picks in 15.
He was bad that year. He was bad.
He was brutal. I mean, Brock Osweiler outplayed him. You know, when Manning was healthy enough to play, it was kind of a surprise that they were benching Osweiler for Manning, but they thought they had this formula, you know, run it a little bit with CJ Anderson. Manning makes the clutch throw late, and you win with defense. And the Steelers were probably thinking they could pull this off. You know, the Saints almost pulled it off last year. Drew Brees was pretty much shot by January. Sure. And if Jared Cook doesn't fumble against Tampa Bay, they might win that game, and they might be in the Super Bowl. So I get it. You can talk yourself into this. But there's also that school of thought adopted by Green Bay, you know, Brian Gutekunst, they drafted Jordan Love for a reason, to try to avoid this awkwardness. Of course, they got a different kind of awkwardness through it all. But that was their thinking, right? Like they wanted to kind of transition from one era to the next. And Aaron Rodgers like, oh, I've got other plans. I'm going to keep playing really, really good football and make things difficult for you. Yeah, I think Roethlisberger is just a different type of quarterback, and he's old, and you can probably hear my voice. I'm not ready to completely write him off like a lot of people. Like, I'm not ready to say he's shot, he's done, he's finished, the Steelers stink, because I believe in Tomlin. I believe in Butler, the defensive coordinator. They've still got some good players over there when they're healthy. And if they can figure out a way to get to 21 points on offense, maybe they've got a shot to make the playoffs.
I think it just goes to show there's no silver bullet when it comes to an aging quarterback. And we've seen teams try to navigate it. Even when you go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, there is a huge level of awkwardness in the middle where you have to trade away Brett Favre, and the fans are split, and he ends up in Minnesota. You know, no matter what the situation and scenario, like, the Colts go from Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck. Peyton Manning goes to Denver and wins a Super Bowl, which I'm sure isn't easy as a Colts fan. Like, there's no silver bullet, and there's no way to, make that easy, perfect transition all the time. You could end up in a situation like Pittsburgh right now, where I'm sure they would love to have a Jordan Love that's ready to play this year and start building towards the future. They didn't. They have to go back to Big Ben, and it's not looking great right now. The Saints are trying to make do with Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill. We've seen some good things from Winston. We've seen some classic Jameis Winston moments as well already. That's not a perfect transition. The Patriots are, go from Tom Brady. They have to, go to Cam Newton and then now Mac Jones, which is going to take some time. There is no perfect scenario. And if there was, every team would be following that blueprint. I'm not sure. I mean, the Montana to Young thing went pretty darn good, I would say. But overall, there's always going to be some awkwardness. There's always going to be some pain points. I just don't think there's any way around it.
So this is the pregame where we have to play body language police, right? And watch Aaron Rodgers' interactions with Mike Tomlin and, maybe some players over there, because maybe the Steelers are looking for a quarterback next spring, and maybe Green Bay is looking at some of those young players. I mean, I don't know. Aaron Rodgers spoke pretty highly of the Steelers this week, it seems. So you never know. He's going to want to go to a contender. He's going to want to go to a solid franchise. That would make a lot of sense. Andrew Filipponi, we actually went to college together. He covers the Steelers at the main radio station down there. He brought it up on local radio here in Buffalo, actually. He thinks that's like the perfect fit next season. So we'll see how that shakes out.
Green Bay can atone for their draft of Kevin King over TJ Watt. Just swap Rodgers for Watt. We can atone for that situation, bring a Wisconsin guy back to Green Bay. Rodgers goes, everything's perfect, right? Except the salary cap, and that, it's a mess other than that, but it's fun to dream.
Pittsburgh would probably do that, right? Even though
I think you have to.
I think they would. Yeah.
You probably have to.
I think Green Bay would probably do that, throw in a couple of first and a couple seconds or something, right?
That's the fun part about football. Like, I don't know if you're a wrestling fan at all, Ty, but wrestling in and of itself is fine. But when you can fantasy book all the things in wrestling and talk to friends about what if this happened, that's the best part about wrestling. The same thing with football, right? Football, obviously amazing on Sundays. You get these, the last Sunday Night Football game is incredible, but part of the fun, I mean, this is why Madden is a $1 trillion industry. Fantasy football is a $1 trillion industry, is because the fantasy thinking of oh, this trade could happen or do this. I know nobody wants to see Aaron, in Green Bay wants to see Aaron Rodgers in a Pittsburgh Steelers jersey, but these things are always just fun to talk about and throw against the wall, because it's fun talk.
It's fun talk, but up until 2-3 years ago, that's kind of where it ended. I think that it's kind of realistic talk to a degree. I mean, who would have thought that Sean McVay, when Jared Goff is his Super Bowl quarterback, that a couple years later he'd be doing everything he can to trade him to Detroit, get Matthew Stafford, or that Kyle Shanahan would be trying to get Aaron Rodgers, and who knows what that did to that relationship with Matt LaFleur. That was quite the handshake there in midfield. But I mean, all these things that used to be fantasy, and you thought, oh, that's just the NBA. That's NBA stuff. It's great to see NFL GMs and coaches kind of wise up and figure out, hey, trades aren't necessarily a bad thing. It can be win-win. It can be something that the Rams don't care about the draft anymore. They don't trade all your first for, star players.
And honestly, and I this may sound like a joke, it's 1,000,000% not. We are now getting to the point where these GMs and coaches played Madden and played fantasy football growing up. I'm not joking. Yeah. They lived through all of that. They are well aware. And I know it's not the same. I know these are real human beings and I know things like that, but all the trade, and they've seen it obviously in the NBA, and they've seen teams have success with moving star players around. I don't think that this is a one-off. All the quarterback musical chairs that we saw the last couple seasons and all these guys going different spots, I don't think that's the end. I think that's more the beginning.
I think you're right. It's probably generational, and it's refreshing, honestly, because I think a lot of people that work in the NFL are so caught up in their ways, and they just run a team because that's the way you run a team. That's the way their dads did it. That's the way their dads, their uncles. It's just you just run a team this way. Of course, you make this kind of trade. Of course, you wouldn't trade a first round pick for a play. I love all this outside the box thinking, and we've mentioned it before. I mean, I do the podcast with Jim Monis. He's worked in the NFL for a couple of decades. He's not in the NFL now, so he's speaking honestly.
Right.
That's why I love talking to him. He's so like he thinks outside of the box, and a lot of this stuff drives him insane. He says so many of these people who are running teams, it's just like they just get so tunnel vision and caught up in it. And it's usually the older people who've been around forever. So when you look at a trade that's bold, that's new, it's usually from a 30-something-year-old Sean McVay doing it. It's not going to be from, I don't know, Dave Gettleman, the giant, like, no,
they're picking first round running backs.
Exactly.
No, it's a great point. Gutekunst has spoken openly of saying like, I wish more teams would be in on trade talks and like moving up and down in the draft. And like, he wants more of that. And he's been very clear about that. So I think as we get more, younger GMs in the next generation, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that. I wanted to go over the NFC North quickly though today, Ty, because I think the NFC North's in a very interesting spot right now. We know that Green Bay is going all in on this season, trying to get another Super Bowl. We'll see what next year brings when we get to next year and all the, fantasy stuff we just talked about that could become reality. But I also find it very interesting. The Vikings, give credit to them. I thought they had a really nice, like that could have been maybe not a nail in the coffin for the Vikings, but going 0-3 would have certainly not helped their cause. And it could have spiraled very quickly. Getting a signature win against a Seahawks team that's also struggling a little bit right now. But I thought getting that win was really huge for them. So maybe there's a little bit life in them, but Chicago looks beyond terrible. Just one of the worst offensive performances you will ever see in any NFL, much less the modern NFL. And then you've got Detroit, who we know they're a rebuilding team and they're just still kind of going through the phase. To be fair to Detroit, give them credit. They were right in it at the end against San Francisco, even as awful as that game started. Green Bay, they give a really solid half to, and maybe without a couple, a fumbled snap here or there, they could have been in that game to the end and probably should have beat Baltimore had it not been for Justin Tucker just going God mode and kicking 66-yard field goals, Tecmo Super Bowl style. This NFC North, though, besides maybe a little glimmer of hope from the Vikings, seems like Green Bay's in all likelihood going to win this season. But as I'm looking at this closer and then we get our first glimpse of Justin Fields and Jared Goff's in Detroit and those sort of things, I'm looking at the players 25 or under. And what I'm thinking is, all right, Green Bay's probably, kind of a little bit on the older end and they're, trying to win now and they've given up all this money from future years to win now. But, and obviously the Lions and Bears and some of these teams have been picking earlier in drafts and moving up a ton of capital to get a Justin Fields. But I'm looking at players 25 and under. I'm going to give you these really quickly, Ty. I want to ask you, which group of core 25 or under you would rather or most want in the NFC North? So the Bears, Roquan Smith, David Montgomery, James Daniels, Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet, Jalen Johnson, Justin Fields, Tevin Jenkins. All right, you've got Roquan who's playing okay. Justin Fields is definitely a wild card. We'll kind of see what happens. Montgomery's really good, but he's a running back. Other than that, Jalen Johnson's a nice corner. Tevin Jenkins still hasn't played. So it's a lot of question marks there for the Bears on their 25 or under. Lions, you got Frank Ragnow, Jonah Jackson, Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift, Aleem McNeil, Penei Sewell, Jeff Okudah. Okudah has struggled and been injured again. DeAndre Swift's been hit and miss. Sewell looks good, but it's still early. Hawkinson looks good. But like if your best three are Ragnow, Hawkinson, and Sewell, like it's not like you don't have like this insane amount of building blocks, right? Vikings, Alexander Mattison, Cam Dantzler, Ezra Cleveland, Justin Jefferson, Christian Darrisaw, Irv Smith. Like that's like Justin Jefferson and a bunch of guys right now.
Right.
And then the Packers, Elton Jenkins, Kenny Clark, Darnell Savage, Jair Alexander, Rashawn Gary, AJ Dillon, Eric Stokes, Jordan Love, who is still a wild card as well. And that's not even including some of those guys along the offensive line like Myers, Newman, Runyon, who are already starting in their first or second year in the league. Not only is Green Bay set up right now to have the most level of success, I think if you look at their long-term projections, I think Green Bay set up better than any of the other teams in the league, right? Or in the conference, right? Division right now, easy for me to say.
That Brian Gutekunst really did a terrible job building this team.
Get him out.
I mean, get him the hell out of here. Fire his ass. Get him out. He doesn't know what he's doing. Like, he's been drafting really well. I get it. Kevin King, TJ Watt. That's egregious. I mean.
And that was Ted Thompson, technically. Like
that's right.
So even that.
That's right. Thanks for correcting me. That was a little while back. But yeah, he's been drafting really well. I mean, who else can just throw a third string left tackle that nobody's heard of against Nick Bosa on the road in prime time? I get it. The quick release helps. Chipping him a little bit helps. But he was phenomenal. Like, for this front office to find a player like that and to draft as well as they've drafted the last 3 years, think back to 2018 and how bad that roster really was when things kind of fell apart with McCarthy. They just had a lot of misfires. The Demarius Randall, Quentin Rollins draft was really bad.
So bad.
I mean, Ted Thompson really lost it at the end, and you know, God rest his soul. And he's a Packers Hall of Famer. Did an unbelievable job, one of the best GMs of our lifetimes. But you know, he shouldn't have been the GM the last year, maybe 2 years. His health was really deteriorating and concerning people in the front office.
Right.
So it got bad toward the end. And what Brian Gutekunst has been able to do, drafting all those players you just mentioned and building this team up. I mean, that's the classical debate, right? I think, you know, back to this offseason, the pro Aaron Rodgers side of things would say, you know, he is the one making a lot of these players better. And then there's another faction that says, well, no, these players are good in their own right. And right. I kind of fall on that. I think Marquez Valdes-Scantling is just a damn good player who's big and fast and strong and is a legit number 2. And I think a lot of those players you mentioned are going to be good players regardless of who the quarterback is. So I think they will be able to kind of transition whenever they have to transition because they've drafted so well. And regardless, you know, what quarterbacks even really scary in the division? I mean, Justin Fields maybe one day, but he's got a long ways to go if that game is any indicator. And Kirk Cousins looks good right now, but he's looked good in September in the past. Love Jared Goff, but he's surrounded by a mess and they're rebuilding. Who knows how long he's going to be the quarterback. So yeah, the Packers are good in the present, the future, however you slice it.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the younger quarterbacks right now, you had to rank Jared Goff, Jordan Love, Justin Fields, Kellen Mond. Like, obviously Mond's probably going to be at the bottom of that list, but Jordan Love has as much right as anyone, certainly in the division, to be the best quarterback in that group 2-3 years from now. And we'll see what happens. Nothing's guaranteed, but the fact that they have that sort of wild card and lottery ticket still on the roster while they're competing at the level that they are right now. I agree with you. It's a true testament to Brian Gutekunst and what they've been able to do to have a really well-rounded roster, both guys who are here to win now and try to win a Super Bowl, but also there shouldn't be like this extreme fall off, even when some of these guys have to leave in free agency and whatnot.
No doubt. Totally agree with all of that. And they've, to bring back Aaron Jones and what's essentially 2 years, $20 million. Yeah, it's got to be one of the best bargains in football. He's unbelievable. I mean, I don't know why we don't talk about him on that Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey level. I mean, McCaffrey can't stay healthy of late. I mean, right. Aaron Jones, just only exceptional things happen when he has the ball. He is so fun to watch, and he is the heartbeat of that offense.
He is. When the offense is going through Aaron Jones, this offense is better. And some of the things that he's able to do to contort his body, I'm actually glad you brought this up because I see every week 4th and 1 goal line situation and everyone's saying, you got this 250-pound AJ Dillon. Like, why isn't he in the game? I'd like to see some AJ Dillon too. And I'm not saying he's not a good back or anything like that, but when you get in those 4th and 1s or you get in those goal line situations, everything tightens up. And yes, it is nice from time to time to get, have somebody who can move a pile here and there. However, in those situations, the creases are so small that you need A, elite vision to find that crease, and B, sometimes it's almost better to be able to sneak through a crease than it is to try to push 200-300-pound guys back the other direction. And especially when AJ Dillon takes a little bit to get going, like he is a little bit of a momentum runner where if he has a head of steam, he's good, but he needs a little bit to kind of get going. Give me Aaron Jones in a goal line situation every day of the week. I don't care what running back you're comparing him to because his ability his vision, his ability to cut back on a dime if he needs to find that hole, even if it's to his left, right, far right, whatever the case may be, to squirm through that tiny hole. And then, oh, by the way, dude has some ridiculous power and slipperiness as well for his size that he finds ways to move that pile even after he's hit, no matter where he's at on the field anyway. I love Aaron Jones and what he brings, but that goal line, there's a reason he has a crap ton of touchdowns over the course of his career.
I mean, who's a terrible short yardage back. I mean, maybe terrible's a little strong, but he's not good short yardage. Derrick Henry.
Yeah, he hasn't
I
been
mean,
great.
it's similar to Dylan. I mean, they've got the same, Dylan has said this himself when we've talked about it, 40 vertical bench, that combine stuff. I mean, they're so similar. And I think that there's no knock on them, but when they get ahead of steam, look the hell out.
Yeah, you don't
get
want
out of
anything
their
to do with
way.
them. Yep.
But you just put it perfectly. When everything kind of tightens, you want a guy who's going to be decisive and know exactly where he's going and find that crease, and that's Aaron Jones.
And cut on just north and south, cut on a dime, get there fast. No, I totally agree with you. We've got a couple things at Go Long that we need to discuss because one is insanely exciting, and that's obviously McGinn's new Brett Favre series. I was talking to you offline. I'm somebody where like new, TV series comes out or anything, like I can't watch it until at minimum, like the entire season is done. But usually like I want to wait until everything's completed because otherwise like I watch an episode of Loki and then I'm just like, I need the next episode and it's not there yet. So like I'm debating, like, do I read this first one of McGinn or do I wait until like all of this series is out? But either way, I am so jacked up for this. I can't wait for all of them to be released, no matter what order I read them in. But tell everyone kind of about this series because obviously our listeners are going to want to know about it.
Man, I appreciate the opportunity, Andy. So he's done these McGinn files before at The Athletic where, Bob has scouting reports on every player that's been drafted since I think 1985.
It's crazy.
And I've been to his house, many times in Green Bay. I mean, we're talking file cabinets upon file cabinets, printed out transcripts from scouts and personnel men from around the NFL. So, the first one that we're going to do at Go Along, it had to be Brett Favre, right? So he pulled out all those old files to see what the scouts, and it's crazy to see like which teams loved him and which teams hated him. And that's all in there too. But then he talked to Brett Favre himself for over an hour, and Favre relived it all. Favre, and I love this show because your listeners are hardcore Packer fans, as I hope our listeners of our podcast are as well. You hear so many Favre stories over and over. I mean, that nickel story has been told
Classic.
And retold. I mean, it's an incredible story how he didn't know what a nickel defense was, but we've heard it, several times over. Reading Bob's series, and there's 10,000 words in all, there are so many anecdotes and stories that Brett brings up that I don't think I've heard anywhere. What one of his pre-draft workouts was just flat out hungover, just talked about drinking the night before, showing up in flip-flops and running a 40. So I don't want to give too much away.
Right.
It's for subscribers only. We're kind of a mix of free stories and pay stories that go along. But something like this, definitely want to make it exclusive to the paid subscribers. So yeah, golongtd.com and you can get all of it. We've got our own podcast. We're doing one a week. So hopefully people check us out.
That's awesome. I'm very, very excited for this series. I mean, I like all the Favre books and everything. Like it's just, they read so easy because Favre, at the end of the day, like Favre's just this amazing character, right? Like he's an amazing character in a story. It just happened to be real life. And it happened to be in Green Bay that these stories happened in, it's just incredible.
I think even Packer fans can relate to him. Maybe not, maybe it's still too soon, but like, I think fans can appreciate the thought process behind why he did what he did, kind of forcing his way to Minnesota. You know what I mean? You don't want me? Then I'm gonna go beat your ass. I mean, this is me saying it, not him. But like, even like it's so just red-blooded America. People can relate to him. They can relate to his story. They can relate to the ups, the downs, the car crash that he talked about, out of college, to the problems with drugs and the painkillers. All of that. It's just on a very human level. Any human being, any fan can relate to what Brett Favre's been through, and I just think that's so unique to the story of pro football. So yeah, I think people will enjoy the series. Bob also talked to Ron Wolf for a long time about, his pursuit of Brett. He wanted him so bad, obviously out of Southern Miss, couldn't get him with the Jets. And lo and behold, got him in Green Bay and the rest is history. I don't know, are we sitting here talking about the team? If Brett Favre isn't the quarterback, who knows? Who knows where the franchise is at?
It's a really good question. And like Favre always reminded me of like almost like a real life Stone Cold Steve Austin, like always going to say what he wants. His boss, you want to fire me? I'm going to give you the double birds and I'm going to go, do something else. Like it was very very Stone Cold of him to say, you know what, fine, I'll go play with the Jets for a year. I'll see you the year after that. And of course handed Green Bay 2 losses that next season. Rodgers got the better of him the 2 after that. But again, he like at the end of the day, he's just this amazing character, and it's always fun to learn some of those backstories. You also have a show that you're doing with Isaiah McKenzie. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, man. I when I launched Go Long and got to thinking about what the site's going to be, what this platform's going to be, you know, number one, trying to just humanize the game, really lean into those profiles that I've loved to do for years and years. You know, that long form is going to definitely be a staple for what we always do. But I just thought that with what COVID did to kind of coverage of the league in general, where everything's kind of pushed to the podium, everything's Zoom press conferences, and, you know, reporters aren't really in the locker room. No, some teams are better than others. I was just down in Jacksonville, their PR department, amazing. Hung out with Laviska Shenault for a feature. You know, I'm not bashing everybody by any means,
Right.
but let's face it, like, reporters and fans, as an extension of, don't get to really know these players like they have for years and years. So I got to know Isaiah McKenzie here in Buffalo. Unbelievably authentic personality, just fun as hell, prankster. Been through so much growing up in Miami Gardens, Florida. And I just brought this idea to him, like, look, let's just do 10 episodes, hour a piece. We'll hang out at a restaurant here in Western New York, meet some fans, get to know the town, and let's just BS and have some fun. And have people really kind of connect with you, get to know you, see a side of you that maybe they can't see at a press conference or on the field. And that was the impetus for it all. And we're going to launch October 4th. So Monday is our first show.
Nice.
It's free to everybody. So you can go to Go Long TD, watch the show, listen to the show. And I don't know if anybody from Buffalo is listening, but if they are and they're a subscriber, they can get a table at the restaurant that's sponsoring us. But yeah, even if you're a Packer fan, I think you'll enjoy it. He's a lot of fun.
Yeah, the awesome thing about this is a lot of, you know, the people who watch this show and listen to Pack a Day are just hardcore football fans, right?
Yeah.
So like inject as much football into our veins as possible. And you and Isaiah McKenzie talking football is a perfect way to inject more football into our beings. So cannot wait for that. Ty, you're a legend as always. Thank you so much for joining us today. I always appreciate it. Can't wait to talk to you again in a couple of weeks. Feel free to plug anything you're working on, your Twitter handle, anything you want to talk about on the way out.
Man, you blew enough smoke up my ass right there, Andy. So no, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. It's great just talking about the Packers a heck of a lot more with Bob, with you. And I'm so pumped that we're doing this every other week. So yep, golongtd.com. Would love it if people subscribed. And I'm no dummy. I know a lot of people subscribing right now are Packer fans. They're in Wisconsin. They're around the team. No, there's somebody from Budapest in Thailand who are diehard Packer fans who subscribed last week. So I shouldn't say Wisconsin. They're all over the place. So I'll be doing a lot of Packer stories, no doubt about it.
I've been on Packers podcasts. I think one was in Brazil. I think one was, man, where was the other? Like I've been on the one in like the craziest places, and it's just awesome. Like this mind-blowing experience to me that I'm like doing, like the people are listening in these completely other areas of the world. Packer fans know no bounds. And that's why I say, like, you know, Peter Bukowski obviously locked on Packers on Pack a Day. It's like, we should be like, there is so much oxygen for everyone that's creating Packers content. None of us could possibly fill it all. And the more that we can work together and do stuff and promote our work, it benefits everyone. That's, you know, the tide rise, whatever that stupid saying is, it helps everyone is the end of the story. So I appreciate you doing this. We will talk again in a couple of weeks. For those of you listening, make sure to subscribe already. Go to golongtd.com and check that out as well. We'll be right back here in 2 weeks. I will be right back here tomorrow with Ben Fennell. So make sure to check that out as well. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.